This is going to be the episode that we are going to
recap.
Yeah, cut into Bevo. We're going to recap Texas season. I mean, for their first year in the SEC, good job. I mean, you got to give it to them, man. They did pretty freaking good for their first year in the SEC. But the Texas Longhorns, in my opinion, opened up the SEC with a very soft schedule. They opened up with Colorado State, beat them 52-0. Then they took on a number 10 Michigan and beat them 31-12. So everybody was like, look, man, they could be really good. Or is Michigan really that bad? And I think Michigan was just not that good, except when they played Ohio State. But that's another subject that's not for the show. Then they took on a UT San Antonio, beat them 57-7. Then they took on University Louisiana Monroe, beat them 51-3. They took on Mississippi State and beat them 35-13. Those last three games were won by Arch Manning, the future. Then they took on a number 18 Oklahoma at the Red River rivalry.
Good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Those words usually run together when I say it too fast. But anyway, they took on Oklahoma, and that's always been an interesting game, whether it's in the Big 12 or the SEC or whatever. But we're glad that rivalry is now in the SEC. It's good. It's a big college football moment. And they beat Oklahoma, handled them, man, 34-3. They just throttled them jokers. Then there's a team that's loved by one of us that went to Austin, Texas, as we discussed last week, and we delivered the Longhorns' first loss, 30-15. Then they took on a number 25 Vandy, and they won 27-24. That was close. Then they took on the Fighting Flobies in Florida, beat them 49-17. That was a throttle. Then they took on the Fighting Pittmans in Arkansas, and they won that game as well to 20-10. Then they took on Kentucky and beat them 31-14. And then this game was very anticipated. We talked about this game quite a bit, going into the week of this game, of this actual game. And it was a big deal. People in the state of Texas have been waiting on this game for a long time, the return of this game, which was at the time a number 20 and in College Station. They were doing some yell practice, but it wasn't enough. Didn't work. They won that. The Longhorns won that game 17-7. It was a very fun game to watch. There was no doubt about that. And then they're going into the SEC championship with one loss. And then they had to go to Atlanta, which was an hour and 15 minutes away from the motherland of Athens, GA. And Georgia rolled in there and beat them 22-19 in overtime. So Georgia delivered their only two losses of the season. So regular season, they were 11-1. SEC championship, they did their second loss, and then they went to the playoffs. And this is where the Longhorns did pretty well. They took on Clemson and beat them 38-24. Good job. Clemson was playing some pretty good football towards the end. Cade Publix was really coming around as the starting quarterback, leader of that program. But Quinn Ewers did what Quinn Ewers does, man, and he put his team on the back, and they won that game. Then they took on the old Fighting Scadaboos. And, man, what a game, man. That game was stupid fun to watch. But the Longhorns prevailed 39-31 in second overtime. And then they took on the reigning national champions with the Ohio State Buckeyes, and they lost 28-14. But Quinn Ewers, again, never stopped fighting, even in that game, man. Quinn Ewers was very impressive this last season. But all in all, fantastic year for your first time playing big boy football. We're glad you're in the SEC. At least I am.
Yeah, a solid show by the Longhorns this year. All right. Glad to have you in the conference. Certainly, they put on a better first-year outing than their friends in Norman, Oklahoma. It didn't work out quite as well for the Sooners this year. But I think I think we brought in two really good football programs, not just historically, but the ability to come into this conference and compete. Obviously, Texas competed right off the rip, going all the way to Atlanta this past season. But I think Oklahoma is probably going to be in the mix. I don't know how quickly they'll arrive, but I think both of these schools bring a lot to this conference. Quinn Ewers had an all SEC type of season. Now, what do I mean by that? We don't know what he's going to look like in the NFL, but you have players that come around that just get it done every Saturday during their time in this storied conference. And I believe during their first year, all the pressure that was on this team to perform, all the pressure that was on Quinn Ewers to perform. It's not like Arch Manning showed up 5 minutes before kickoff against Colorado State. Like Quinn Ewers knew that there was that guy waiting right behind him, that all he needed was 5 minutes of your time, and he could sell you a timeshare today. Quinn Ewers went into this season having that type of pressure on him, and he delivered every week that he was on the field.
There's no doubt about that, man. He's a gamer, and we got to keep in mind, man, Quinn Ewers is a young quarterback. And when I mean young, I'm actually talking about his age. He left high school after his junior year and went to the Buckeyes and sat for 1 year. They redshirted him, and then he immediately came to Texas and took on, grabbed the bull by its horns, or bevo, and really did a pretty good job there, man. So he's a little younger than as far as age wise, but man, you couldn't tell it on the field. The boy knows how to play football, man. But before we start diving into the individual games, and we talked about good addition to the SEC or whatever. As you could probably see, I'm not in my studio at home. I am on the road working. And so I had to go see someone today, met a guy for the first time at the plant. And we started talking about football, SEC football. He's a Missouri guy. I explained to him about the Chickens' love for their head coach.
Wrong.
And anyway, he started, we started talking about different things, and he said something about Texas and, being in the, I said, yeah, they're in the SEC now. He goes, that's right, they are. And he goes, do you think the SEC will stop at 16? And I go, I don't know, man. I said, I actually believe that they will probably add 2 more. I don't know if they'll go 4 more, but they'll probably grow 2 more, because I think, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit in the past, I think they want to get into that North Carolina, Virginia market. So they could go after a NC and even a Virginia Tech. And he was like, wow, so yeah, him and I had that conversation about adding teams to the SEC.
Yeah. That's lovely. Did he scratch you behind your ears?
My tail wagged a little bit.
Your tail wagged a little bit.
Yeah, it did.
No, if you're going to talk continued build out of this conference, certainly Texas and Oklahoma gave us some solid cornerstones to continue that growth. The seasons that both of them had, even Oklahoma coming out 6-6 with their final record this season, had a good enough showing that any other school that would be targeted by the SEC, be it a North Carolina, be it a Virginia Tech, can sit there and say, hey, Oklahoma went in and fared pretty well their first year. They didn't light any fireworks off, but they fared well. And look what Texas did their first year in the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
We think that with an invitation, we could go compete too.
Yeah, they did. I don't know if this has, and I guess this is maybe some of the forecast show or not, but since we're talking about the addition of them to the SEC and who benefited from that, I think the SEC benefited from it, but I think Texas benefited from it as well, being in the SEC versus the Big 12. I think throughout the season, it prepared them to face hard, bigger schools, or harder teams, because it's not, you don't have a whole lot of warm-up games in the SEC as far as conference games. All your conference games are any given Saturday for the most part. The Mississippi States this year and, some of the other ones like Kentucky was not that great this year. So, except when they played Georgia, but we won't go there. But anyway, let me get real quick. So what I was going to say is, I think they benefited. The other thing I think they benefited from was, now I know that this doesn't always mean anything, but they're the number one recruiting class coming in, out of 2025 recruits. Texas is. Does them going to the SEC, did that help that? And I say yes.
Oh, absolutely. Even if it only helped Sark and his crew in the living rooms when they're making those closing pitches to these young men and their families of, we play in the Southeastern Conference. Not only are we Texas, but we play in the SEC, the premier college football conference in the country. Texas has benefited from this more so, I think, than anybody, even to the point where the SEC gave them a gift to come in, which was arguably the easiest conference schedule we have ever seen.
For sure.
Coming into this particular schedule, okay, your first rip in the SEC is Mississippi State, followed by Oklahoma, which it's not like Texas is surprised. They've been recruiting against Oklahoma their entire lives. So these two teams know what the other has. And Texas certainly knew, I think we're going to be okay. Okay. Vanderbilt, Florida's not on their best right now. Arkansas, Kentucky is typically competitive, but not competitive enough to consider if you're Texas. The only two games that are really on your schedule going into next season are Georgia and Texas A&M. Georgia, because right now in the modern era of college football, Georgia is Georgia, and that means something. Texas A&M is not only your rival, but they've been competitive in the Southeastern Conference. They've been one of those schools that you talk about going into every season. So those are your only two games of note on your entire conference schedule. And then you throw in Colorado State, Texas San Antonio, and Louisiana Monroe. Give me a break. I'll give you a push on Michigan and the value of that opponent. They were coming off of a championship season, so there's that. Really, this is not much of a schedule to hang your hat on other than, well, at least they're SEC schools.
Yeah, they're SEC school. They must, because, Texas was the highest revenue school out of all of college football as far as media rights and stuff like that. Their program generated more money than even Alabama did. And part of it is because ESPN had their own Longhorn network, right? And so coming in, so the SEC wanted that money. They wanted that notoriety, all that stuff that went with it. But they must have, because that must have been a handshake deal coming in. It's like, look, if you come over, we will give you an easy schedule. Kind of like what happened in the NBA this year with the trade for Luka. That is the most ridiculous. I know we're not an NBA show, but that's one of the most ridiculous trades ever in the history of NBA, and made absolutely no sense. LeBron must have done something, and then next thing you know, the Dallas Mavericks had a 1% chance of getting the number one draft pick, and what did they get? The number one draft pick. So I think there must have been some backdoor deals with Texas on this, because you're right. If you look at the schedule that they had to play, you knew they were going to play. They knew they were going to have to play A&M. That was going to be a game that had to happen. Other than that, who else did they play besides Georgia? They didn't play Alabama, South Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss. They didn't play any of the 4 or 5 teams that are big, the big boys besides Georgia. They did. They had a cupcake schedule, and they have a cupcake schedule again this year. But hopefully, welcome to the SEC. You got beat by Georgia twice.
How much of this do you think stemmed from the fact that Texas had a Manning? Ooh. And the SEC wanted to keep the lineage intact, the heritage intact, that all Mannings come through the Southeastern Conference. So therefore, Texas was able to essentially hold this poor young man hostage and ransom an easy cupcake schedule.
Look, man, I didn't even think about the Manning kid on this deal, man. And so that's kind of a good point. Now, I think the Manning deal, I think them coming to the SEC was already done before the Manning deal, before he went to Texas. I could be wrong.
That's what makes it funny to think about now.
I don't think very well.
This is true.
So, but let's go back. Let's go back. Let's talk about Arch Manning, right? So he is the future, and we'll talk about him next week when we talk about the Forecast Show. However, he did play in three. Well, he started and played 3 full games when Ewers went down, which I think in itself, getting into, we'll go talk about Quinn Ewers in a minute, but Ewers has been out every year that he played at Texas. He got hurt and missed some games every year. So I think that's going to probably played some factor in his recruiting, not his recruiting, but his drafting going to the NFL. But Arch Manning played in 3 games: UT San Antonio, Louisiana Monroe, and an SEC school, Mississippi State.
A gauntlet schedule for the young man.
Yes, I know. But look, he still threw for 223 yards, 258 yards, and against Mississippi State, 325 yards. Now, against Mississippi State, Carson Beck threw for almost 500 yards. So their defense does, their defense allows a lot of passes, I guess. But all in all, I mean, so we did kind of get a look on what Arch is going to do this year.
And those were the only 3 games where you had the opportunity to get that look. I know he took snaps and he was in on specifically designed plays throughout the season. But those 3 games are the only 3 that you actually get to see what type of quarterback Arch wants to be and how Texas is going to use him. Because every other time, if Arch came in the game, it was going to be a quarterback run.
Oh, yeah. It was extremely predictable.
It was exceptionally, you're like, it's a Manning. He's going to drop back and throw, right? Nah. He's going to scramble for about 3 or 4 yards at best.
No, when he came in for Georgia, when they played Georgia the first time in Austin, they actually pulled Quinn Ewers out and put Arch in, I think, to start the second half or right after their first drive in the second half, and let him hand the ball. And, man, that he saw them Georgia defensive boys coming after him. He looked scared, which, do you blame him? I would be too.
The only time that a Manning running the football surprised anyone was when it was Peyton.
Yes.
Because Peyton, you were so used to seeing him drop back and work the pocket, find the open man. And then when he's with the Broncos, I think is when they started doing it. I'm sure he did it a few times when he was with the Colts, where all of a sudden Peyton fakes a handoff and rolls out because nobody expects that old guy to limp into the end zone. And that's exactly what he would do. With Arch, yeah, we knew that they were going to let you try and run the dive. We all saw it coming, big guy.
Yeah, I hope that in the upcoming season, Arch is smart enough to know I can't scramble and run all the time because I'm going to get killed. Maybe 2 out of the 10 games he'll get destroyed because everybody else is, well, except for week 1, and we'll talk more about that. But my Lord, they got a team to play on week 1 this year. Quinn Ewers had a great season, man. They threw the ball all over the place, man. There was never that one receiver. There was never that one running back. Georgia needs to take a little bit from this playbook, right? And spread the ball out some, I think, more, but also allow people to get into a rhythm. The one thing that they had that Georgia did not have, let's just say on the running game, was they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games just in the regular season, plus the SEC championship. So out of 5 out of 13 games, they had a running back get over 100 yards. That happened one time in Georgia last season. Yeah. Not good. So
I think Sark and the way that he's going to shape this Texas team, continue to shape this Texas team, I should say, is going to look a lot like Nick Saban and his time at Alabama. They're going to build to where they play solid defense. They're going to run the ball. Now, does that mean a workhorse like Saban was known for doing in Bama? I don't necessarily think so. I think Sark likes the ability to run by committee, but they're going to be a powerful ground game in the Southeastern Conference for sure. And then it never hurts to have a Manning in your backfield.
No, I don't think so. We'll see how long he stays, 1 or 2 years. I think he'll be there. I think he'll be there till he graduates. Or, you never know what's going to happen with college football. They may just let people stay forever.
We just love it so much just to make a career out of it.
Yeah, you are a super, super, super duper senior.
There you go.
Yeah. Look, so let's talk. How bad did they get hit by the portal?
Oh my! In the portal, they have lost 14 All but one has decided where they're going to go. There's only
Really?
Yep. At this point in time,
Okay.
they lost a total of 8 solely to graduation. Now, some of these other players that went in the NFL draft, they may have graduated too. I don't know all the specifics about their academia over there, but 8 players that were just lost because they graduated out. 14 to the NFL.
Wow, good for you guys.
Well, here's where it gets fun. 4 out of their starting 5 offensive linemen,
Ooh.
they're all in the NFL now.
So let me ask you this. Has Sark had time, or was it already in place before he got there to have the depth to overcome something like that?
They're not hurting when it comes to depth. The only player, for example, and I know that this isn't the end-all be-all, but looking at the quarterback room, the only player that they lost from last year is Quinn Ewers. He went into the NFL. Every other player, 4 deep behind Quinn, still there at Texas. They did not get hit hard in the running back room. Wisner is still there. Baxter is still there. He's in question about being ready for the season to start, but he's still in there. Jaden Blue, NFL draft. So that's when you get 3 deep, air quote 3 deep for Texas. They just used everybody in that room. You hit the NFL guy.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Wisner was a true freshman, right? That kid was a stud, man.
That is correct. That is correct.
He killed it, man. But their offensive line, they lost 3 out of the 4.
No, they lost 4 out of their 5.
4 out of their 5.
Yep.
Okay.
The entire left side of the line went to the NFL draft, both the left tackle and left guard, NFL draft. Jake Majors, the center, NFL draft. Right tackle Cameron Williams, NFL draft. 4 out of 5 starting O-linemen in the NFL.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Now that sucks if you're Arch and now you got to stand behind new people, but that's still impressive that many of their offensive linemen went into the NFL draft.
Well, and let's just look at the talent, or at least what we expect of that talent that's filling in those gaps. And I'm not talking about players that have transferred in. That'll be in for the next show. But you've got a redshirt freshman, Trevor Gooseby, 4-star. A sophomore, Nito Umizula, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, another 4-star. Cole Hudson, a 4-star. Brandon Baker, a 5-star. They got depth at the O-line position.
Yeah, they're good. They are good.
They gonna be all right.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty good, man. Sark's doing some good things over there in Texas, man. So, look, man, I really, as far as Texas season, man, I think they had a fantastic year. I know that they didn't win the SEC, but they were the better team in the long run in the SEC this past year. I know I said that Georgia was the best because they won the SEC, but, man, they went 11-1 in regular season, man, and that's just impressive. That's very good. Welcome to the SEC.